All around the world, there are strange reports of man-like canine beasts. They go by many names: shapeshifters, beasts, dogmen, and manwolf. On June 8th, 2022, the city of Amarillo, Texas announced on social media that a strange photograph had been taken at the city's zoo in the early morning hours of May 21st. The photograph shows a strange object or figure just beyond the zoo's borders.
The Amarillo case is a particularly interesting one because this photo of this upright, allegedly canine figure started making the rounds right around May to June of 2022, and it gained traction very, very quickly. Amarillo is located in the far north of Texas, in the area we refer to as the Panhandle. It's actually closer to Oklahoma and other neighboring states than it is many, many parts of Texas. There aren't a lot of cryptid sightings in this area that are already documented necessarily, but what Amarillo does have a lot of are haunted locations. A quick internet search will turn up no fewer than 10 results for haunted schools, restaurants, factories, buildings that have been around since the 1800s when the city was first formed. It's an extremely haunted location, but as far as dogman activity, this recent picture seems to be it. Now, there may be other stories that haven't surfaced, but this is the one that we know about right now.
It kind of set the internet ablaze with discussion about it because what it looks like is an upright canine-like creature. But there's a wide variety of stories going around about it, that it looked like plastic bag, an escaped gibbon from a zoo. As far as I can tell, there was never a conclusive theory as to what it was. It was just a bunch of different theories all floating around.
The Amarillo photograph has become just a massive staple in this sort of online space dedicated to the investigation, the discussion, and in some ways, the perpetuation of this whole dogman phenomenon, these weird sightings and potential evidence of these wolf-man-like creatures that we call manwolves. The photograph was first posted to the public in early June of 2022, although it was taken in late May of the same year. The photo was supposedly taken off of one of the security cameras that is up in the Amarillo Zoo in Texas, and it shows a view of the outside of the zoo because it's actually up against a neighboring park, and the border between the park and the zoo is visible in this wire fence. And beyond this wire fence, it's unclear exactly how far beyond, but beyond the fence there is this mysterious figure. And this figure really sparked a lot of discussion online. In no small part due to the fact that the Amarillo city's tweet about the picture really kind of took off and seemed like it was meant to take off. It was posted as a sort of, in a way, a dare to get people to talk about the zoo more by talking about this photo. It sparked a lot of interest in the zoo. Now, whether or not the tweet was meant to get attention for the zoo is not exactly clear, but it is clear that it was meant to draw attention to this particular photo, to this particular subject, to foster engagement with it.
Even just in mainstream headline news, the city of Amarillo leaned into it and said, "This is an unidentified Amarillo object, and we'd like your help identifying it." But in the months and weeks that followed, we really didn't hear anything else about it from the city of Amarillo. In fact, many researchers and investigators who reached out to authorities in the area, as well as the city of Amarillo itself, received crickets in response to their inquiries.
The camera does not face into the zoo, instead the camera faces into the park. So this creature was supposedly walking through the park. I remember Carrick and I, without being able to travel to the Amarillo Zoo, were kind of using Google Earth Street View to find the fence where this potentially could be. And so I remember one of the things we did was try to determine the height of the fence, because the chain link fence that you can see in the photo There's a chain link fence around the zoo as well, and we don't know how tall that chain link fence was, but we could kind of guesstimate based on the height of a door that we found in the chain link fence. And doors in fences typically have an average height, so from there we could guesstimate how tall the actual fence was, and from that we could guesstimate how big the holes in the chain link fence were to kind of compare it to the height of the creature. And what we discovered was that this height of the creature was a lot more than a gibbon would be.
From the image alone, we can't decide an exact identity, and we really went through the ringer trying to figure it out. We did tests with 3D models of gibbons, 2D models of gibbons and spider monkeys, the exact kinds of spider monkeys that the zoo actually has, which is an available database online, you can look at that. And while on a surface level reconstruction, they would look very similar, especially when you applied the correct effects to make it look like it's part of the photograph, what you end up finding is that the body just looks wrong. And you can tell that by creating what we've done here, which are these wireframe copies of these bodies, essentially. So if we look at the Amarillo subject as an anthropomorphic figure, you can attach a wireframe to it to see where the elbows would be, where the hands would be, where the knees would be, etc., etc. And when you try to match that up to things like a gibbon, you get something really similar, but all of the joints are in the wrong places, and it just doesn't fit as well as it should if it is really a photo of an escaped gibbon or a spider monkey. And on top of that, for it to be an escaped animal, you would think that there would be more of a sort of alert put out there if the zoo was really concerned about a potentially dangerous animal having gotten loose. We went pretty crazy trying to figure out, okay, if we can't find a photograph reference to figure out what this is, maybe we can at least try and analyze the image more. So we looked at the fencing and tried to find out, you know, for a zoo fence, maybe on a primate enclosure, how wide apart should the wires be in a fence? How thick, in that sense, are the holes in that fence? And using those measurements, we determined that if this subject was pretty close to the fence, we're looking at something that, depending on the size of the fence's holes, would be between 2.5 to 4 feet. And it took us a long time to try and figure that out, but it went out the window because we found out that this, again, is not actually a subject inside the zoo. The camera is inside the zoo, but is facing the border of Thompson Memorial Park across from the zoo. So the fence is likely not meant to be something that's the same grade as something that would keep in animals. So if we're looking at a standard fence at that point, it varies so much that we don't have an accurate sense of what the limitations of that would be. We do have a building in the background that we can try to use to estimate the size of the subject, and if we're looking at typical door heights, the subject could be anywhere from 4 to 5 feet tall. So nothing incredibly tall, and nothing that couldn't be an inanimate object that just looks strange on camera, but it still leads us to this dead end of answers where it seems every corner that we turn trying to figure this out, we're met with conundrum after conundrum after conundrum. Now, there are some other explanations as well. One Twitter user named Spencer Harvey pointed out that there are methods by which wild canines attempt to climb fences, and actually provided us with a reference image of a coyote attempting to climb a fence by pressing the side of its body up against the wire fence with its paws sort of hooked into the spaces between the wires and trying to sort of jump its way up, paw by paw. And while the posture he suggests is really interesting, using the wireframes and even just using a comparison image, the two are not in the same angle, they're not in the same sort of body formation, and they're also not taking the same posture. So if that is what this is, there's no way that we would be able to tell just based off of the suggestion. Upon examination, there's nothing that we could find that points to it being a digital hoax of any kind. There's no indication that the night vision's effect is off or something like that. It looks just like any other, even dark-haired animals would look under night vision. And there's no evidence that it's been digitally tampered with in its metadata or that it's been edited in Photoshop or anything like that. So whatever this photo is, it is a real photo that was not tampered with, that came from the CCTV of the Amarillo Zoo. So what is it exactly that people are seeing in this photo? Why is it that there's so much controversy around interpretations of the photo? Part of why it has become so controversial is because there's not that many details to really glean from the photo itself. The figure is ambiguous, it's blurry, it's got a white coloration to it, at least in this night vision sort of lens that is being used on this CCTV camera. And it looks to be anthropomorphic in some way, aka it has humanoid features, 2 arms and 2 legs, that are sort of bending in these weird positions. It's hard to tell what parts of the body exactly fit where, whether this is an angle of an object or is actually an anthropomorphic being. A lot of this just lies unknown. So you have a lot of room for speculation because of that. And you have the sort of dogman community, if we want to call it that, sort of picking this up and trying to look at it under the lens of man-wolves or dogmen. It did, again, foster a lot of engagement with the subject. And it wasn't that long after the initial post, maybe about 10 days or so, that the first mentions of this kind of appearing to some people like a werewolf or a man-wolf or a dogman began to crop up in the replies to this tweet. There were some people just simply suggesting that it looked a little bit like a werewolf to them. Some people, after seeing those tweets, began to think more about this and even did outlines around the subject to sort of showcase where they thought the canine-like features on this supposedly bipedal figure were. And of course, a bipedal canine begins to fit into the realm of dogman. And then, of course, as it disseminated the story, as it disseminated into the internet does what it does and comes up with stories. One popular story came to the site 4chan, and it was sort of this allegedly eyewitness encounter with the Amarillo creature. And it was this whole story about this zoo worker who had seen this animal on the cameras, and it was moving in a strange fashion. And their co-worker saw it, and the police came and shot, and it left afterwards. And ultimately, it's probably just a scary story that someone wrote to make the whole subject more interesting. We are about a year and a half out now from when this event, whatever the event really was, took place. And we are still no closer to finding any answers as to what the Amarillo subject was. Whether it was a known animal, a man-wolf, an object that got misidentified, somebody in a suit, we don't know. We have no leads, and that makes it certainly a very interesting case to add to this whole roster, because it's somewhat rare in this field that you find something that, at least as it stands currently, is genuinely inexplicable. But again, as it stands currently, the Amarillo subject is.
At the end of the day, over a year since the photo's circulation, we still don't know what it is.